Most gaming worlds give you locations. Zelda gives you places soaked in mythology, personality, and nearly 40 years of fan memory. That's why today, I'm breaking down the most famous locations in the entire Zelda franchise and everything that makes them legendary. Starting with a forest that nobody has ever fully figured out, Lost Woods. The Lost Woods is the oldest recurring landmark in the entire Zelda series, and after almost 4 decades, we still don't know what it actually is. Let me explain. When it first appeared in the original 1986 Legend of Zelda, the design was deceptively brutal. You'd walk into a forest screen with 4 exits, pick a direction, and end up in what looked like the exact same screen. No map, no hints, just the forest eating you alive, looping you in circles until you stumbled onto the correct pattern or gave up entirely. It was one of the earliest video game locations that actively punished you for being there. But here's where it gets interesting. The Lost Woods isn't just a maze, it might be something far worse. 2 competing explanations exist for what the forest actually does. The first is that it's a protective enchantment, a magical barrier keeping outsiders away from sacred sites like the Master Sword's resting place. If you don't belong there, the forest redirects you until you leave. That sounds almost friendly. The second explanation is significantly less friendly. In Ocarina of Time, it's heavily implied that anyone who gets lost in the woods and isn't a Kokiri eventually transforms into a Stalfos, not teleported out, transformed into a skeletal monster, and lost forever, and the developers have never confirmed which interpretation is correct. After 12 plus mainline appearances, that ambiguity is clearly intentional. Every game handles the Lost Woods differently. Ocarina of Time gives us Saria's song in the Sacred Forest Meadow, turning the woods into something nostalgic. Breath of the Wild completely reinvents navigation. Instead of memorizing a path, you follow wind particles drifting through the air, deviate, and the fog swallows you whole. And that's the real tension at the heart of the Lost Woods. Is it protecting something sacred or cursing everyone who enters? Nearly 40 years later, nobody has a definitive answer. The forest just keeps showing up, game after game, daring you to walk in. But at least the Lost Woods lets you leave. The next location on this list, it has a habit of trapping everyone inside it, heroes and villains alike. Hyrule Castle. No location in the Zelda franchise has been destroyed, corrupted, besieged, and rebuilt more times than Hyrule Castle. And that's not an exaggeration, it's the entire point. First appearing as a playable location in A Link to the Past back in 1992, Hyrule Castle immediately established itself as the permanent seat of the royal family and the symbolic center of the entire kingdom. Every version of Hyrule is literally built around it. But here's the thing. It has appeared in at least 8 mainline games, and almost every single version features a completely different architectural layout. A Link to the Past gave it a moat. Ocarina of Time introduced the iconic drawbridge and courtyard. Twilight Princess went full Gothic cathedral, scaling the thing up so massively that you could see it towering over the horizon from nearly every corner of the overworld. That last detail matters more than people realize. In Twilight Princess, the castle isn't just a building, it's a constant visual reminder of what you're fighting for. Every time you look up, it's there, dominating the skyline, silently telling you that the kingdom's fate is tied to that structure. But Breath of the Wild flipped the entire formula. Instead of working your way toward the castle as a final destination, it's sitting right there from the moment you wake up. Corrupted, sealed, with Calamity Ganon imprisoned inside. Players who ignored the main story could literally walk straight to it within the first hour, and the ruined interior became one of the most rewarding exploration spaces in the entire series, packed with powerful weapon caches, guardian-infested corridors, and environmental storytelling that rewarded curiosity over following quest markers. Then Tears of the Kingdom added a layer that reframes everything. The castle was partially rebuilt on the exact site where Ganondorf was originally sealed in ancient times. Let that sink in. Every battle fought at Hyrule Castle, every siege, every final confrontation across the entire franchise happened on ground that was already consecrated by imprisonment. The castle wasn't just where Ganon kept attacking, it was always where the conflict was destined to return. That's what makes Hyrule Castle so effective as a location. It has never simply been at peace in a game where you can actually explore it. Every version is either under siege, already fallen, or being desperately defended. It's not a palace, it's a monument to recurring tragedy, rebuilt over and over on cursed ground, and the people inside never seem to learn. But if the castle represents Hyrule's power, the next location represents its people, and it's been quietly reinventing itself for over 30 years. Kakariko Village. Most Zelda locations want to impress you. Kakariko Village just wants to survive. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it one of the most compelling places in the entire franchise. It first showed up in A Link to the Past back in 1991 as a simple settlement. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet village you stumbled into early in the game, talked to some NPCs, bought some supplies, and moved on. It was fine, forgettable even. But then Ocarina of Time came along in 1998 and gave Kakariko something it never had before, an identity. In Ocarina, Kakariko Village is the ancestral home of the Sheikah tribe. It was originally their exclusive settlement, a hidden community built in the shadow of Death Mountain, until Impa opened its gates to Hyrule's common folk. That single piece of lore transformed it from a generic RPG village into a place with history, with cultural weight, with secrets buried underneath its streets. Literally underneath them. Here's where it gets dark. The graveyard sits on the eastern edge of the village. The bottom of the well, one of the most disturbing mini-dungeons in the entire series, is a short walk from the village center. And when you return as adult Link, the ancient horror Bongo Bongo escapes from the well and sets the entire village on fire. This is not a peaceful farming community. This is a village that has been through absolute hell and somehow keeps rebuilding. And here's a detail that most people don't know. The architectural design of Ocarina's Kakariko was directly inspired by Langde Miao village in Guizhou, China. Shigeru Miyamoto specifically referenced that village's organic elevation changes, the way buildings are stacked on hillsides at different heights, because flat European village layouts couldn't support the kind of vertical platforming they want Link to do. The design wasn't just aesthetic, it was functional. Now, what's genuinely fascinating about Kakariko is that it has appeared in at least 6 canonical games spanning over 30 years, and it looks completely different almost every time. The Ocarina version is compact and medieval. Twilight Princess gave it a more rustic frontier town feel, and Breath of the Wild completely reimagined it with Japanese mountain village architecture, paper lanterns, thatched roofs, the whole aesthetic. Zero visual consistency between versions, but it always reads as Kakariko every single time. That's because the identity isn't in the buildings. It's in the relationships, the cultural significance, the feeling of a community that exists in the shadow of something larger and more dangerous. The architecture changes, the soul doesn't. Fans almost universally cite the Ocarina of Time version as the most emotionally resonant Kakariko, while freely admitting that Breath of the Wild's version is arguably more beautiful. But the real debate isn't about which looks better. It's about whether you can trade mystery and danger for serenity and still call it the same place. Whether a Kakariko without a cursed well and a burning skyline is really Kakariko at all. The answer, apparently, is yes. But some of us still miss the fire. But if Kakariko is where ordinary people try to live ordinary lives in an extraordinary world, the next location is where the extraordinary literally begins. And it might be the single most important building in Zelda history, Temple of Time. Here's a location that broke its own timeline before you even walk through the door. The Temple of Time is one of the most iconic structures in all of Zelda, and most players know exactly one version of it. The cathedral from Ocarina of Time. Solemn, quiet, and possibly grand. You collect the 3 spiritual stones, play the Ocarina of Time, and the door of time opens to reveal the pedestal holding the Master Sword. Only the hero of time can draw it. That moment, stepping forward and pulling the blade, is one of the most important events in the entire franchise. It splits the timeline into 3 branches. Every Zelda game that follows exists because of what happens inside that building. But here's the thing, that's not where the Temple of Time begins. Skyward Sword, released in 2011, but set chronologically before every other game in the series, shows you an ancient version of the temple. It's not a cathedral, it's an open-air courtyard sitting in the Lanayru Desert, functioning as a gate of time, and it doesn't survive. Impa destroys it using magical explosives, specifically to prevent pursuit, sealing off the timeline behind her. The first version of this sacred structure ends in deliberate demolition. Now here's where it gets genuinely weird. The temple is called the Temple of Time. That name references the hero of time, a title that doesn't exist yet in the chronological timeline when the temple is built. Skyward Sword predates Ocarina of Time by thousands of years in the lore. The name honors adventures that haven't happened yet. It's a temporal paradox baked directly into the architecture. The temple was named after a future event designed to honor a hero whose defining story gets told in what's technically a prequel. That's not an accident. That's Zelda's lore doing something genuinely clever with retroactive design, and most players walk right past it, and then you watch it die. In Ocarina of Time, the temple stands whole and magnificent. By Twilight Princess, set years later, you find it as ruins deep inside the sacred grove. The structure is crumbling, overgrown, barely recognizable as the same building. The sacred space has become a forgotten relic buried in forest. Then Breath of the Wild finishes the job. The Temple of Time exists on the Great Plateau as little more than collapsed walls and broken columns. You can stand inside what's left and look up through a missing roof at open sky. 3 games, 3 stages of decay, a complete structure, partial ruins, total collapse. You're watching a building die across multiple titles, spanning decades of real-world releases. Whether each game's version represents the exact same physical structure or different sacred sites built to serve the same purpose remains genuinely contested. Developers confirmed the Skyward Sword connection, but left the cross-game architectural continuity deliberately ambiguous. Some fans argue it's one building slowly falling apart across eras. Others believe each iteration is a separate temple constructed in the same tradition. Nobody has a definitive answer, and honestly, both interpretations make the lore richer. But if you think a crumbling temple is the saddest thing Hyrule's geography has to offer, wait until you see what happened to its biggest lake. Lake Hylia, 40 years. Lake Hylia has been sitting in the middle of Hyrule for over 40 years, making it one of the oldest named landmarks in the entire franchise. It showed up in the original 1986 game as the largest body of water in the kingdom, housing dungeon islands beneath its surface, and it hasn't missed a beat since. At least 8 mainline games have featured this lake, spanning 4 decades of Zelda history. But here's the thing, most people just think of it as the Big Lake. It's so much more than that. Let's start with the name itself. Lake Hylia is named after goddess Hylia, a guardian deity entrusted by the 3 golden goddesses to protect Hyrule and the Triforce after they created the world. That's not some throwaway naming convention. That's the developers telling you this body of water is sacred ground. It's not just geography, it's a spiritual landmark baked into the mythology of the entire world. And the geography actually backs that up, because Hyrule's water system is a fully designed ecosystem. Water originates from Zora's fountain, flows through Zora's river, passes through Gerudo Valley, and eventually reaches Lake Hylia. The lake isn't just big, it's the terminal point of the entire kingdom's water supply. Every drop of fresh water in Hyrule ends up here, which is exactly why every villain eventually targets it. In Ocarina of Time, the lake gets completely drained. Morpha, the boss of the water temple, curses the water source so severely that the entire lake empties out. You literally have to equip iron boots and sink down to the submerged entrance just to access the temple. The landscape transforms from this beautiful open expanse into a barren crater. Then in Twilight Princess, Zant freezes Zora's domain solid, which cuts off the water flow entirely and causes Lake Hylia to drain almost completely. The lake doesn't just look different between games, it changes states within games. Drained, drained again, restored. It's environmental storytelling at its finest, where the physical condition of the lake tells you exactly how badly things have gone wrong in Hyrule without a single line of dialogue. But here's what really makes Lake Hylia iconic, and it has nothing to do with dungeons or villains. Ask any longtime Zelda fan about their favorite gaming memory, and a surprising number of them will tell you about riding Epona around Lake Hylia in Ocarina of Time. Not a boss fight, not a puzzle, just galloping along the shoreline with that music playing, the water stretching out in every direction, and the feeling that Hyrule was genuinely, impossibly beautiful. It's one of the most peaceful moments in gaming history. No combat, no objectives, just open water and a horse, and the kind of quiet that makes you forget you're saving the world. Players don't remember Lake Hylia for what they did there. They remember how it made them feel, and that emotional register is exactly why a lake has survived 40 years of game design evolution without ever feeling outdated. But if you think a sacred lake is the emotional heart of Hyrule, wait until you see the little ranch sitting right in the middle of Hyrule Field. A Lon Lon Ranch. Every location on this list so far has something in common. They're all built around mythology, sacred power, ancient temples, or the fate of kingdoms. Lon Lon Ranch is a farm. That's it. A farmstead sitting in the middle of Hyrule Field where a girl sings to horses, and her dad naps too much. And honestly, that's exactly why it belongs here. Introduced in Ocarina of Time in 1998, Lon Lon Ranch isn't a dungeon. It's not a sacred site. There's no Triforce connection, no ancient seal, no divine purpose. It's just a ranch run by Talon and his daughter Malon, and it endures in the collective memory of this franchise because of what it makes you feel, not what it makes you do. But let's talk about what it gives you, because it gives you something massive. This is where you get Epona. Malon teaches young Link Epona's song, one of the most recognizable melodies in video game history. That simple tune, played on an ocarina to calm a horse, became one of gaming's most iconic musical moments. And when you return as adult Link, you race horses against Ingo to win Epona for good. The most famous animal companion in the entire Zelda franchise comes from this tiny, unassuming ranch. Not from a temple, not from a goddess. From a girl who likes singing to horses. But here's where it gets dark. When you return to Lon Lon Ranch after the 7-year time skip, the geography is completely unchanged. Same fences, same buildings, same track. But the social situation has collapsed entirely. Ingo has seized control of the ranch under Ganondorf's authority. Talon has vanished. Malon is still there, but she's essentially trapped, working under a man who answers to the tyrant who destroyed Hyrule. This is one of the most elegant pieces of environmental storytelling in the entire game. The temples show you what Ganondorf did to sacred places. The ranch shows you what he did to people. Same location, completely different world. No dramatic visual overhaul needed. The horror is entirely social, and that makes it hit harder than any crumbling ruin or flooded dungeon. And Malon herself matters here more than people give her credit for. She represents civilian life, the version of Hyrule that that exists outside the dungeons, outside the Triforce, outside the prophecy and the destiny. Link's connection to her is the series' clearest articulation of what he's actually fighting for. Not the Master Sword, not the Sacred Realm, the right of people, like Malon, to keep living normal lives, to sing to horses without a dictator looming over them. Here's the thing that makes Lon Lon Ranch truly unique on this list, even though it shows up again in later games, appearing in the Minish Cap with Malon and Talon, referenced in Four Swords Adventures, and even leaving behind Ranch Ruins and Tears of the Kingdom. None of those versions carry the same weight. The Ocarina of Time version is the definitive one, and it's not close. That's the version people remember. That's the version that matters, because no other iteration captures that specific emotional arc. The peace before the fall, the quiet life destroyed by a tyrant, the girl still singing despite everything. You can visit Lon Lon Ranch in other games, but you only truly experience it once. A farm where a girl sang to horses, and a hero remembered why the world was worth saving. But if Lon Lon Ranch shows you what peace looks like before it's taken away, the next location shows you what happens when an entire town knows the end is coming and has exactly 72 hours to deal with it. Clock Town is the only location on this list that doesn't exist in Hyrule. Let that sink in for a second. Every other entry we've covered belongs to the same kingdom, the same mythology, the same interconnected world. Clocktown doesn't. It exists in Termina, a parallel dimension that feels wrong from the moment you step into it. Familiar faces appear in unfamiliar roles. The rules you've learned across every Zelda game don't fully apply here, and the town at the center of it all is quietly one of the most psychologically brutal locations Nintendo has ever designed. Introduced in Majora's Mask in 2000, Clocktown is divided into 4 districts: North, South, East, and West, all arranged around a central clock tower. That tower isn't just a landmark, it's a countdown to extinction. The moon is falling, and it will hit in exactly 3 days. You can see it from almost everywhere in town, growing visibly larger as each cycle progresses, and the people living below it know exactly what's coming. But here's what made Clocktown revolutionary. Over 50 NPCs follow individual daily routines across the repeating 3-day cycle, completely independent of what the player is doing. The milk bar opens at 10 p.m. The curiosity shop stays open from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. The postman runs his delivery route regardless of whether the moon is 12 hours from impact. The world doesn't pause. It doesn't wait for Link to solve the problem. It just keeps moving toward its own destruction. That design choice created something no Zelda location before it had achieved. Clocktown feels inhabited rather than staged. It doesn't exist to serve Link's quest. Link exists inside a place that was already alive before he arrived, and will continue functioning or dying, whether he intervenes or not. Citizens alternate between denial, panic, preparation, and resignation, depending on which day of the cycle you observe them. Some flee, some refuse to leave, some pretend nothing is happening. The emotional range of a doomed population plays out in real time around you while you're trying to solve puzzles and collect masks. And that's what separates Clocktown from every other hub world in the franchise. It's not famous for visual grandeur or ancient mythology. It's famous because it makes you feel existential dread about a place you've visited dozens of times. Every loop resets the clock, but it doesn't reset what you know. You've watched these people panic. You've seen the carpenter board up his shop. You've heard the final night's music shift into something desperate and hollow. The town becomes a horror experience disguised as a hub world, and most players don't even realize that's what's happening until they're already deep inside it. The 2015 Majora's Mask 3D remake actually relocated the bank to the back of the clock tower to improve player accessibility. Even sacred designs get revised, but the core innovation remained completely untouched because you can't improve what Clocktown actually does to people. The scheduling system, the escalating atmosphere, the slow realization that this place is going to die, and there's nothing permanent you can do about it. That's not a design feature, that's a psychological experience, and no other Zelda location has ever replicated it. But if Clocktown proved that a location could function as an emotional weapon, the next entry proved that a location could reinvent how players learn to play games entirely. Great Plateau. The Great Plateau is the newest location on this list, and it's here for a reason that has nothing to do with nostalgia. It's here because it might be the most deliberately designed location in the entire Zelda franchise. And honestly, it might be one of the most deliberately designed locations in gaming, period. When Breath of the Wild launched in 2017, every single player started in the same place. A raised landmass surrounded by impassable cliffs on 3 sides and a gate on the 4th. You physically cannot leave until you complete 4 Spirit Shrine puzzles scattered across the plateau. The boundary is real. It's absolute. But here's what makes it brilliant. It never once feels like a cage. The plateau is large enough, varied enough, and dense enough with things to discover that it feels like freedom. You're contained inside something that feels open, and that contradiction is entirely by design. Because the Great Plateau isn't just a starting area, it's a microcosm of the entire game world compressed into a single elevated landmass. Every core mechanic Breath of the Wild wants you to understand. The plateau teaches you combat, foraging, cooking, climbing, environmental puzzle solving, lateral thinking. And it does all of this without a single tutorial screen. No press A to do this. No pop-up telling you how stamina works. Just a world that responds to what you try and lets you figure out the rest through experimentation and consequence. Drop a metal weapon during a thunderstorm. You'll learn why that's a bad idea. See an apple on a tree? Pick it. Find a campfire. Cook something. The design philosophy is total. Every mechanic is discovered, not instructed. But the plateau isn't just a tutorial. It's a story. The old man who wanders the plateau, offering cryptic guidance and occasionally roasting apples by a fire, is not who he appears to be. When you complete all 4 shrines, their positions form an X pattern across the landscape. And the old man reveals himself. He's King Rome Bosphorus Hyrule, Zelda's father, the last king of Hyrule, lingering as a spirit on the plateau where Link was placed into his resurrection slumber. He's been guiding Link the entire time, appearing as a stranger to ensure the hero rediscovers his own capability without the weight of expectation or royal obligation. The king watched Link struggle, learn, and grow, all while pretending to be nobody. That reveal reframes every interaction you had with him, every vague hint, every moment he stood just close enough to help but never intervened directly. He wasn't a random NPC. He was the fallen king of a ruined kingdom, placing his last hope in a hero who doesn't even remember his own name. And then there's the landmark sitting at the plateau's northern edge. The ruins of the Temple of Time, not a new structure, not a reference. The actual Temple of Time, crumbling and overgrown, connecting Breath of the Wild directly to Ocarina of Time's mythology. Ancient Hyrule and modern Hyrule exist in the same physical space, and the plateau forces you to walk through that history before you ever leave the starting area. You're standing in the ruins of the series' own past, and the game never stops to explain that. It just trusts you to feel it. Here's where the Great Plateau transcends Zelda entirely. Game designers across the industry have cited this location as a foundational example of teaching through environmental storytelling. The concept of a tutorial area that doesn't feel like a tutorial, that respects the player's intelligence enough to let them fail and learn organically, became a benchmark after Breath of the Wild. It didn't just change how Zelda games are structured, it demonstrably influenced how tutorial areas function in AOA game design broadly. Studios building open-world games after 2017 had to reckon with what Nintendo proved on this single plateau, that players don't need to be told what to do. They need a space designed well enough that doing things feels inevitable. The Great Plateau earns its position at the end of this list, not because it's the most recent location, but because it represents the fullest expression of everything Zelda location design has been building toward for decades. A place that teaches without instructing, contains without restricting, reveals character without exposition, and connects to the mythology without ever stopping to explain itself. That's what all 8 of these locations share. The Lost Woods, Hyrule Castle, Kakariko Village, the Temple of Time, Lake Hylia, Lon Lon Ranch, Clocktown, the Great Plateau. None of them are backdrops. None of them are set dressing you walk through on the way to something important. They are the something important. They're characters in their own right, with histories, secrets, and design philosophies that shape not just the Zelda series, but the entire medium around it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.